Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. And I have to say, looking at the sheer volume of news on the desk this morning, I feel like we need a seatbelt for this.
It is definitely a high-velocity news day. One of those days where the headlines don't just, report on the world. They seem to be actively reshaping it.
That is exactly the vibe I'm getting. It feels like we're in a moment of, redrawing maps. We're seeing maps being redrawn in the cosmos by new telescopes.
And maps of ancient history being redrawn by archaeologists.
Right. And then, perhaps most stressfully, the map of the Arctic is being redrawn on what feels like a cocktail napkin in Davos, Switzerland.
That's a great way to frame it. Whether it's the physical boundaries of nations or the boundaries of what we even consider truth in science, the lines are just, they're moving.
So we have a marathon session ahead of us. We're going to try and connect the dots between this exploding commercial space race, an ethical crisis in artificial intelligence that is, frankly, quite terrifying, and a geopolitical whirlwind involving Greenland that has everyone on edge.
And we're not just skimming the surface today. We're going to pull from a pretty massive stack. We've got updates from NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and the ESA, the European Space Agency.
Plus some deep tech reports from places like TechCrunch and The Verge.
And for the geopolitics, we have analysis from France 24, the BBC, Al Jazeera, plus some heavy scientific papers on archaeology and health.
We've got the data, now we just need to find the signal and the noise. And I want to start by looking up, way up, the quote-unquote new space age.
Sounds good.
We usually talk about space exploration in terms of, where are we going? But today the news feels more like, what are we seeing? And maybe even who owns the signal.
Right. And for that, we have to start with the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST. Every time we think we understand the universe, this telescope sends back a picture that just forces astronomers to rewrite the textbooks.
And this time, it's the Helix Nebula. People often call this the Eye of God, right? Because it looks like a giant eye staring back at you from space.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a planetary nebula in the constellation Aquarius, about 650 light-years away. But the new image Webb captured is being described as a cosmic lava lamp.
Okay, cosmic lava lamp is a great headline. But what does that actually mean, scientifically? Are we just looking at pretty colors?
No. The lava lamp analogy is actually a pretty good description of the physics of gas expansion.
Really?
Yeah. What Webb's infrared sensors are picking up are these incredibly intricate, knotty structures of gas, they call them cometary knots, that are moving through the nebula. In the past, with other telescopes, we just saw a blur.
It's just a colorful cloud.
A colorful cloud. Now, we can see that the gas is actually behaving like fluid in motion. It's being driven by this intense ultraviolet radiation from the dying star at the very center.
So it's like how the wax in a lava lamp heats up, rises, separates, and then falls again. That kind of movement.
Precisely. It's showing us the hydrodynamics of a star's death. This isn't just a static single explosion. It's a fluid, turbulent, ongoing process where the star is ejecting its outer layers. And in doing so, it's seeding the universe with carbon and oxygen.
We're watching the ingredients of life being stirred into the cosmic soup.
That's a great way to put it. It's stellar alchemy in real time.
That is poetic. But Webb didn't stop there. The report also mentioned something about a red nova. This sounds like a sci-fi superweapon.
It does sound ominous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A red nova is a very specific type of stellar merger. It's what happens when two stars spiral into each other and, collide.
A stellar car crash.
A spectacular one. And Webb found the remnants of one of these events. It's allowing astronomers to do what you might call forensic astronomy. They're looking at the debris field, the chemical signatures, to reconstruct the crash.
So we're looking at these ancient collisions. But closer to home, the traffic is getting pretty heavy. We talk about the commercial space race constantly. But there's a story about Blue Origin that feels like a real pivot point. Jeff Bezos is launching something called TerraWave.
This is a significant move. I mean, for years, we've watched SpaceX just completely dominate the low Earth orbit internet game with Starlink. But Blue Origin is finally showing their hand. TerraWave is a proposed network of, get this, 5,400 satellites.
5,400. That's a lot of hardware to put up there. But the specs are what caught my eye, 6 terabits per second. It seems excessive for just checking email.
And that's the key differentiator. Starlink is largely a consumer product.
Right.
It's for the person in a rural cabin, the RV owner, the boat captain.
Right.
TerraWave isn't for them. TeraWave is targeting enterprise, big data centers, and governments. 6 terabits per second isn't for streaming Netflix.
So what's it for?
It's for high-frequency trading firms that need to shave milliseconds off a trade between New York and London. It's for military drones dumping massive amounts of surveillance video in real time. It's for connecting offshore oil rigs.
Ah, so Starlink is the Wi-Fi router in your house, and TeraWave wants to be the fiber optic backbone that runs under the street.
That's a perfect analogy. It's an infrastructure play. Bezos isn't trying to sell you internet. He wants to own the pipes of the space internet. It shifts the whole conversation from exploration to utility. Space is becoming a place where we park our servers.
Of course, SpaceX isn't just sitting still while this happens. I saw they just launched another 25 Starlink satellites from Vandenberg. It's like they're launching rockets, like people catch a bus.
Group 1730. It's just routine now. And that routine nature is what makes this Internet of Space marketplace so incredibly crowded. We're rapidly approaching a point where Earth is surrounded by a shell of data infrastructure.
And speaking of routine, Blue Origin also just sent humans up again. Mission NS-38, 6 tourists, successful launch and landing.
And did you notice the lack of fanfare? I mean, it barely made the news cycle. It was their 17th human flight.
17.
And there was even a last-minute crew swap, and the mission proceeded without a hitch. That operational maturity, being able to swap a passenger like you're just rebooking an airline flight, it shows that suborbital tourism is entering its commercial airline phase. It's becoming normal.
Meanwhile, NASA is prepping for the real long-haul flight. The Artemis II rocket, the SLS, or Space Launch System, and the Orion spacecraft have rolled out to launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center.
This is the big one. This is the crewed flyby of the moon, the first time humans will go back to that part of space in, what, over 50 years?
Yeah, but what I found really touching in the NASA press release wasn't the technical specs of the rocket, but the cargo manifest. They are carrying legacy keepsakes.
I saw that too. It's fantastic.
They have a swatch of fabric from the original Wright Flyer from 1903.
Yes. Just think about that lineage for a second. They have a piece of the fabric from the plane that flew for 12 seconds at Kitty Hawk, and they're taking it to the moon. It connects 2 points in history that seem impossibly far apart, but are actually only separated by about 120 years.
It grounds this high-tech mission in the human story of just learning to fly.
It creates a beautiful narrative arc, from the dunes of North Carolina to the dark side of the moon. And they have other things too, a photo negative from the Ranger 7 mission, some flags.
A real sense of history.
Yeah.
Now, before we leave space, we have to talk about how we're finding all this stuff, because there's a massive overlap here with our next big topic, artificial intelligence. NASA has this tool called Examiner+++.
This is where the sheer scale of space meets the processing power of AI. So we have telescopes like TESS and Kepler that stare at stars for a long period of time, and they just measure their brightness.
And when a planet passes in front, the light dims a little bit. That's a light curve.
Right. The problem is we have millions of stars and billions of data points. It's physically impossible for humans to look at all those light curves. It would take centuries.
Just too much noise.
So NASA trained a deep learning model, Examiner++A, on all the existing confirmed data. And it has just identified 7,000 potential new exoplanet candidates.
7,000. That basically doubles the known catalog overnight.
Pretty much. And the interesting part is that it's finding things that humans missed. Subtle signals in the noise. For example, there's a report on a wobbling planet.
A wobbling planet.
Yeah, the data suggests this planet has an exomoon that is so massive that it's causing the planet itself to wobble significantly in its orbit.
Wait, if the moon is that big, at what point does it stop being a moon and start being a binary planet?
That is exactly the debate astronomers are now having. If the center of gravity between the two bodies is actually outside the planet, are they just two planets dancing through space together? AI is forcing us to redefine our basic vocabulary for the cosmos.
And speaking of redefining, there's a new theory on dark matter. This has been one of the biggest mysteries in physics for decades.
Hot dark matter. For a long time, the standard model was cold dark matter. The idea that it's made of slow-moving particles that clump together early on in the universe's history.
Oh yeah, that's what I learned.
Well, new simulations are suggesting dark matter might have started hot, meaning fast-moving relativistic particles, before it cooled down. And if that's true, it changes our entire simulation of how the first galaxies formed. We might have to rewrite the history of the universe's first billion years.
It's incredible. We're rewriting the beginning of time while also planning our future in space. And while we do all that, we're also seeing some incredible things right here at home. Did you see the photos of the auroras?
Oh, the pilot reports. They were stunning.
Absolutely stunning. Pilots and cosmonauts are saying it's the most incredible display in 20 years. A massive solar storm just bombarded us.
It's a really good reminder that we live inside the atmosphere of a star. We tend to think of space as out there, but when a solar flare hits, our atmosphere lights up. We are physically connected to the sun's weather.
Which is a perfect transition to the technology we rely on to understand that weather and everything else. Let's talk about the AI landscape, because while AI is busy finding new planets, the hardware that runs it is apparently hitting a wall.
A very expensive wall. There's a fascinating story about a startup called Neurophos.
I saw that. They just raised $110 million to build tiny optical processors using metamaterials.
Oh, you need to break this down for me. I hear metamaterials, and my brain immediately goes to invisibility cloaks from science fiction.
That's actually the right area of physics. Metamaterials are materials that are engineered to bend light in ways that nature doesn't normally allow.
Okay.
So an invisibility cloak works by bending light around an object. Neurophos is using that same principle to bend light through a processor to do math. Why use light instead of electricity? What's the advantage?
It's all about heat and speed. Traditional chips use electrons. When you push electrons through a wire or a transistor, they create friction, which creates heat. That heat is the fundamental limit. It's why your laptop gets hot, why data centers need massive cooling systems.
Right.
Photons, particles of light, have no mass and create virtually no friction. You can move them at, well, the speed of light without melting the chip.
That's faster and cooler.
They claim it's 100 times faster and vastly more energy efficient. If this technology works at scale, it could solve the looming energy crisis of AI data centers. It's a huge deal.
But right now, we are facing a different crisis. Micron is warning about a memory chip shortage.
The memory wall.
Yeah.
The AI explosion is eating up high-bandwidth memory HBM faster than companies like Micron or SK Hynix can build it.
Yeah.
There was a timeline showing the semiconductor market hitting something like $627 billion in 2025.
A huge market.
But here's the catch. The PC and mobile markets are saturating. Everyone has a phone. The growth is almost entirely in AI. And if the specialized memory for AI runs out, the whole AI boom could hit a very hard ceiling.
So we have these amazing new software tools, but we might not have the hardware to run them on.
That's the fear. And in the meantime, the software guys are trying to get deeper and deeper into our personal lives. Google has updated Gemini.
Right, the personal intelligence model.
It can now tap into your Gmail and your photos to do things like plan trips for you. It can look at a flight confirmation in your email, cross-reference it with a hotel booking, and then build you a full itinerary based on photos of places you've liked before.
This is the era of the AI agent. It's no longer just a chatbot. It's a thing that does things for you. But this requires a massive level of trust. You are essentially giving the AI the keys to your entire digital life.
And trust is. Well, let's talk about the hallucination scandal, because this is the story that really scared me today. It's about a scandal in NeuroPS.
And NeuroPS is, what, the Super Bowl of AI conferences?
Exactly. Top researchers, top papers, the absolute cutting edge. A startup called GPT-0 decided to scan the accepted papers that had already passed peer review, and found over 100 instances of hallucinated citations.
Just to be absolutely clear, this means an AI likely wrote parts of a scientific paper and it completely invented sources to support its argument.
Yes. It created fake authors, fake paper titles, and it even generated DOIs, those are digital object identifiers, that link to absolutely nothing. They are phantom references.
And the human reviewers missed this at the top AI conference in the world.
That's the crisis. Either the volume of submissions is so high that the human reviewers are just overwhelmed and can't check everything, or, and this is the darker implication,
Go on.
the reviewers themselves might be using AI to summarize the papers they're supposed to be reviewing. And the AI summaries didn't catch the hallucinations from the AI that wrote the paper.
Oh, wow. So you have AI writing fake science and then another AI reviewing the fake science and saying, yep, looks good to me.
It's epistemological collapse. It's a crisis of truth. If the scientific record gets flooded with plausible-sounding but completely fake studies, and then future AI models are trained on that corrupted record, the models become inbred. They start treating lies as facts.
You're poisoning the well of human knowledge.
That's it. It's like we're building a beautiful library where half the books have blank pages inside. It's terrifying.
That is genuinely terrifying. Let's pivot to a field where, for now, you still have to actually dig in the dirt to find the truth. Let's talk about archaeology. although even there, technology is changing the game.
It is. I love this story about armchair archaeology.
This is the one about the hobbyists in Germany.
Yeah. They're not out there with shovels and brushes. They're on their computers using high-resolution satellite imagery and Google Earth to find 4 previously unknown Roman marching camps.
How on earth do you spot a Roman camp from space 2,000 years later?
You look for crop marks. If the Romans dug a big ditch for their fortifications, the soil in that ditch holds moisture differently than the surrounding field, even centuries later.
Ah, okay.
So the wheat or the grass that grows over that ancient ditch grows just a little bit taller, or maybe it's a slightly different shade of green. From the ground, you'd never see it. But from a satellite, you can see the perfect, ghostly rectangle of the camp's outline.
That is incredible. And these camps were found between the Harz Mountains and the Elbe River, which changes the map of Roman expansion, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests the Romans were pushing much deeper into Germania in the 3rd century CE than a lot of historians thought. They weren't just hiding behind the Rhine. They were actively campaigning deep in what they considered hostile territory.
But while those hobbyists found ditches, archaeologists in Slovakia found something much, much more gruesome. A discovery in a town called Vrubly.
The Wearable mass grave. This is a tough one. It's 7,000 years old from the Neolithic era. Archaeologists found a ditch containing 38 skeletons.
And the detail that stands out.
They were all headless.
All 38 of them.
Every single one. And the heads weren't found nearby in the grave. They were taken. This implies pretty strongly execution.
What does this tell us about Neolithic society? We usually think of them as simple farmers, the dawn of civilization.
It tells us that simple doesn't mean peaceful. To execute 38 people, decapitate them, and then dispose of the bodies requires a high level of social organization. It suggests a hierarchy, distinct groups, and likely a period of intense warfare, or perhaps some kind of ritualistic purge due to social disintegration.
It's a sobering reminder that organized violence is, sadly, a very ancient human invention.
A very ancient one.
And from 7,000 years ago to today, organized violence and the maps it creates brings us to our main geopolitical story, the Greenland saga.
Yeah, we have to talk about Davos. The World Economic Forum is happening, President Trump is there, and the entire summit has been hijacked by discussion about, of all things, Greenland.
It sounds absurd on the surface, but let's look at the actual framework they announced. Trump had been threatening tariffs on European nations if they opposed his interest in, well, buying Greenland.
Right, the Greenland tariff. It was a real threat. But today, reports confirm that after meeting with NATO chief Mark Rutte, Trump backed off the tariff threat. They've announced a framework regarding the Arctic.
A framework? That sounds deliberately vague.
It is. But in his comments, Trump called Greenland just a piece of ice.
A piece of ice.
It's a classic negotiation tactic, right? You diminish the asset you want to buy. But everyone in that room knows that piece of ice is loaded with rare earth minerals, and it sits in what will be the most strategic shipping lane of the next century as the Arctic melts.
Trump also made a claim that the U.S. gave back Greenland to Denmark after World War II. Is there any truth to that?
None whatsoever. The media fact-checked that immediately. The U.S. occupied Greenland during the war to protect it from falling into German hands. But America never owned it. You can't give back something you never had.
So what's the point of saying it?
He's trying to establish a narrative, a historical precedent, even a fictional one, that the U.S. has existing rights or some special claim to the island.
And how is Europe handling all this? The word the BBC used to describe the mood was weary.
I think exhausted is more like it. You have the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, talking about a new era where Europe absolutely needs its own self-defense. The Spanish foreign minister is calling for a coalition of the willing for EU defense.
The subtext there is pretty clear.
It's crystal clear. Europe is realizing it cannot rely on the U.S. as a stable partner if the American president is going to threaten trade wars over what amounts to a real estate deal.
And speaking of trade wars, there was a lot of talk about the EU's trade bazooka. Can you explain what that is?
This is the EU's anti-coercion instrument. You should think of it as a trade nuclear button. It gives the EU the legal power to slap massive targeted tariffs on any country that tries to economically bully one of its member states.
So if the U.S. put tariffs on, say, Danish cheese to force a sale of Greenland, the EU could use this bazooka to put tariffs on U.S. tech or cars.
Exactly. But here's the really interesting part. They didn't use it. They suspended approval of a separate U.S. trade deal as a warning shot, but they kept the bazooka in its holster.
Why? Why not use it?
Because, as the German chancellor said, they need defense. They can't afford to completely alienate the U.S. military while Russia is still aggressive in the east. They're trapped between their economic pride and their military necessity.
But the people on the street aren't waiting for the diplomats. I saw a report about the App Store in Denmark.
This part is fascinating. Apps with names like Non-USA and Made-O-Meter are surging to the top of the charts. Danish consumers are literally scanning barcodes in supermarkets to see if a product is American. And if it is, they're putting it back on the shelf.
And some retailers are even helping them do it.
Yes. The Salling Group, a major retailer, is putting little black stars on the price tags of European products. It's a soft power revolt. Trump might get his diplomatic framework, but he's losing the Danish customer. You can't force people to buy your peanut butter.
This is all happening while Trump is also pushing this Board of Peace initiative.
This is his proposed alternative to the United Nations. He wants a new body to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza and to mediate other global conflicts. The membership list is, well, it's eclectic. You've got Israel, Hungary, Morocco, Bahrain, Albania.
A very specific club, but the headline that jumped out at me was about Vladimir Putin.
Putin offered $1 billion to buy a permanent seat on this new board.
And he wants to use the frozen Russian assets currently held by the West to pay for it.
The irony is just, it's so thick. He's essentially saying, take the money you seized from me and use it as my membership fee to your new club. It's an incredible geopolitical troll.
But let's look at this seriously for a second. If you can pay $1 billion for a permanent seat, what does that say about this proposed board?
It says it's transactional. The UN, for all of its many flaws, is built on the idea of sovereign equality. One nation, one vote, at least in the General Assembly. This Board of Peace proposal sounds more like a corporate board of directors. You buy shares, you get a vote.
It commodifies peace.
It completely commodifies peace. If diplomacy becomes a pay-to-play system, that fundamentally changes how international relations have worked for 75 years.
And while they're discussing buying seats on boards, the actual wars are just grinding on. I think we're on day 1,428 of the Ukraine-Russia war.
The situation on the ground is dire. The reports say Ukraine is running low on men, money, and time. Trump and his U.S. envoy, a man named Witkoff, are saying a peace deal is reasonably close. But then you look at the day's news. A drone strike in the city of Dnipro.
Yeah.
Russian sailors seized by the U.S. from an oil tanker.
That doesn't sound like peace talks are going well.
It sounds like escalation. Meanwhile, Estonia, to its credit, announced it's dedicating 0.25% of its entire GDP to Ukraine aid, a massive commitment for a small country.
And in Gaza, the U.S. pitched a development plan for a new Gaza urban hub.
Yeah, a PowerPoint presentation about a shiny new city was presented at Davos. But on the same day, news reports confirmed 5 more Palestinians were killed in strikes. The disconnect between the diplomatic vision in these conference rooms and the reality in the rubble is just, it's getting wider every day.
And it feels like a similar disconnect with the economy, because strangely, despite all this tension, the Greenland tariff threats, the ongoing wars, the markets went up.
They skyrocketed. The Dow was up 600 points at one point.
Why? What happened?
Because the framework on Greenland, as vague as it was, meant the immediate threat of a major US-EU trade war was off the table.
And that's all it takes.
That's all it takes. The market doesn't care about morality. It cares about certainty. Even a vague framework is better than the uncertainty of, maybe I will tariff you, maybe I won't. The trading algorithms read, threat removed, and just hit the buy button across the board.
It wasn't all good news on the business front, though. The video game company Ubisoft seems to be in free fall.
Yeah, the gaming industry is taking a real beating. Ubisoft canceled 6 games, including a big Prince of Persia remake, and their stock plummeted by 33%. It's a sign that discretionary spending is really tightening up for consumers.
And yet, TikTok is apparently worth $60 billion.
The U.S. deal is finally closing, with Oracle and Silver Lake as the main investors. It seems the long saga of a potential ban is finally resolving into a buy deal. Again, money is being used to solve the geopolitical problem.
Okay, let's talk about the planet itself. We mentioned the hot politics, but the weather is also incredibly extreme right now.
We have a massive winter storm, an Arctic blast that's burying about half the United States. At the same time, satellite images show Kamchatka in Russia is under record levels of snow, and New Zealand is dealing with deadly landslides that officials are describing as a war zone. The whole planet feels volatile.
And there's a specific Greenland connection here, too, a scientific one.
Yes. A scientist named Martin Siegert raised a crucial point. Greenland is arguably the most important place on Earth for understanding ice sheets and future sea level rise.
all the climate models depend on data from there.
Right.
His question is, if the U.S. takes control of Greenland and starts to militarize the island, what happens to that scientific data? Does it become classified? Do European and other international scientists still get access? If that data stream gets cut off, we could go blind.
We lose our ability to model the future of the climate. That's a massive risk.
A huge risk.
Okay, quickly, on health. There was a study about kidney testing that seems like something everyone should know about.
This is a really practical one. There are two main tests for kidney function. One is called creatinine, and the other is cystatin C. A new study shows there's often a mismatch. If your doctor only uses the creatinine test, which many do, they might be missing early-stage kidney failure. It's a call to update the standard of care to use both tests.
Good to know. And there was another piece on aging from a Harvard expert.
The usual 6 habits, good sleep, healthy diet, learning new things, exercise. But in the context of our aging political leaders making these world-altering decisions, it feels particularly relevant.
Finally, let's just wrap up with some culture. The Oscar nominations are out.
Looks like 2 films, Sinners and Marty Supreme, are the big frontrunners.
And Taylor Swift is being inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Class of 2026. I mean, at this point, it's just undeniable, isn't it?
But in sports, things are getting very political. Bangladesh is boycotting the T20 Cricket World Cup because it's being held in India.
Yeah, and you have to understand, cricket is like a religion in South Asia. For Bangladesh to boycott a World Cup in India, that is a sign of a deep, deep diplomatic freeze. It just shows how these political tensions are spilling over into every arena, from the UN to the cricket pitch.
Okay, let's try to synthesize all of this. We started this conversation with a cosmic lava lamp, and we've ended with a cricket boycott.
What stands out to me is the theme we started with, redrawing maps. In space, with ideas like hot dark matter, we are redrawing the map of the entire universe's history. In archaeology, with satellites, we are redrawing the map of the Roman Empire. And in geopolitics, we are watching a live attempt to redraw the map of sovereignty itself.
Whether it's by trying to buy a country like Greenland or trying to buy a seat on a board of peace.
Exactly. It feels like all the old rules, Newtonian physics, the UN Charter, standard biology, how we verify scientific truth, they're all being challenged at the exact same time.
And in that chaos, there is incredible opportunity, like discovering 7,000 new planets. But there's also immense danger, like the hallucinations in our AI and, well, the headless skeletons in the ditch.
Well said.
So here's a provocative thought for you, for our listeners to take away. We talked about Putin offering $1 billion for a seat on this board of peace.
Right.
If peace requires a $1 billion buy-in, does diplomacy just become another commodity, another market? If you can buy a seat at the table, is it still a beast table? Or have we just turned the entire idea of global cooperation into a country club with a very, very expensive membership fee?
That is the question, isn't it? If peace is for sale, who can afford to buy it? And more importantly, what happens to the countries and the people who can't?
Something to think about as you watch the stars or the satellites tonight. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure. Keep looking up.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. Today we are staring at a date that future historians are almost certainly going to circle in red ink. January 22nd, 2026. The World Economic Forum in Davos has just wrapped up, but the shockwaves are only just beginning to ripple out. We're witnessing what looks like a fundamental pivot in the operating system of the entire planet, a shift from the slow, deliberative consensus of the post-World War II order to a sharp, high-speed transactional geopolitics.
It certainly feels like the ground has shifted beneath our feet. I mean, we are looking at a scenario where trade tensions have vanished overnight, but the cost was a radical escalation of what I would call the commodification of sovereignty. Might makes right seems to have been codified into international law in the span of, 48 hours?
To set the context for our listeners who might have missed the headlines in the flurry of announcements, yesterday, the United States president abruptly rescinded a looming threat to impose massive 10 to 25% tariffs on 8 European nations. This cancellation came immediately after 2 major, simultaneous announcements: a framework agreement regarding Greenland involving NATO, and the unveiling of a controversial new international body dubbed the Board of Peace. The central question we're tackling today is this: Does this new, highly transactional approach represent a pragmatic evolution necessary for planetary stability, or does it signal the erosion of national sovereignty and the collapse of the rules-based international order?
And frankly, whether the West has decided to eat its own tail just to survive.
I'm going to argue that we're seeing a necessary, albeit abrasive, correction. This transactional approach, trading territorial access for economic security, is effectively de-escalating tensions that were threatening to tear the transatlantic alliance apart. It's stabilizing markets and securing the critical resources we need for the next technological epoch.
And I see the exact opposite. I believe what we witnessed at Davos was the normalization of coercion on a planetary scale. This approach treats sovereign nations as, well, real estate assets, and peace as a subscription service. It undermines established institutions like the UN and NATO, and while it may calm the markets for a moment, it creates dangerous fractures in the social license of our alliances.
Well, let's start with the immediate aftermath, because you can't argue with the ticker tape. For weeks, the global economy has been paralyzed, holding its breath over the threat of these tariffs on European allies. The moment this framework regarding Greenland was announced, the threat vanished. The market reaction was instantaneous and jubilant. The Dow Jones surged nearly 600 points. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ saw their best performance in 2 months. Capital flows where there's certainty, and this deal provided it.
I see why you emphasize the market reaction, but let's be honest about why the market reacted that way. It wasn't relief at some diplomatic breakthrough. It was the relief of a hostage who has just been told the gun isn't going to go off. The tariffs were never about trade economics. They were a leverage mechanism, a gun to Europe's head, to force a concession on Greenland. You don't get credit for putting out a fire you started, especially when you burn down the very concept of sovereignty to do it.
I think that's a bit dramatic. This wasn't just a bilateral arm twist in some back room. The framework was negotiated with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. This is about integrating Greenland into a broader security architecture. We aren't talking about the U.S. simply buying an island like it's 1867 and we're purchasing Alaska. This is about establishing sovereign base areas and securing rare earth minerals.
Sovereign base areas. It's a very sanitary term for carving out autonomous zones inside another country, isn't it?
But it's a proven model. Look at the British bases in Cyprus, Akrotiri, and Dhekelia. Most people don't realize this, but those are sovereign British territories on an independent island. That model has maintained stability in the Eastern Mediterranean for decades. Applying that to Greenland, creating zones under U.S. jurisdiction for security and extraction, allows Denmark to maintain nominal sovereignty while the West secures the supply chain.
Nominal sovereignty is an oxymoron. You either have sovereignty or you don't. The Premier of Greenland and the Danish government explicitly stated, "We're not for sale." When the U.S. president stood at Davos and claimed the U.S. gave back Greenland after World War II, which is a complete historical fabrication, by the way, he revealed the mindset at play here. He views the Arctic and its indigenous population as a strategic asset to be reshuffled, not a home. And citing the Cyprus model is telling. Those bases are remnants of the British Empire. Is that what the U.S. is officially building now, an Arctic empire?
It is realpolitik adapted for 2026. We have to look at the hard data. We have a massive bottleneck in the global technology stack. The U.S. leads the world in chip design, thanks to NVIDIA and Silicon Valley. We have the brains of the AI revolution. But we don't have the body. China dominates the processing of the rare earth minerals and the energy supply chain required to build those chips and power the data centers. We have a massive strategic vulnerability.
So we steal the resources from an ally?
We aren't stealing, we're securing. This deal solves that bottleneck through direct action, rather than waiting for a bureaucracy that's been paralyzed for a decade. The West, and I mean the planetary West, including our Asian partners, cannot afford to leave the world's largest island and its resources in a state of strategic ambiguity while China pushes its polar Silk Road and Russia militarizes the Arctic shelf. If we want a free world, that free world needs independent supply chains.
But securing implies you are taking something that is yours to take. This treats the planet like a risk board. You mentioned the extraction aspect. This isn't just about digging holes for neodymium. We're talking about the Greenland ice sheet, which is indispensable to global climate science. Professor Martin Seegart from the University of Exeter warns specifically about this. Turning that region into an industrial mining zone to feed the AI arms race is reckless. It prioritizes the next technological epoch, as you call it, over the climatic stability of the current one. We are melting the refrigerator to cool the servers.
But without that technological edge, the West loses the ability to dictate any terms, climate or otherwise, to China. It's a hierarchy of needs. Security comes first. And let's look at the European position here. You talk about this as if Europe is united in outrage. But look at the leadership. Germany is now 96% dependent on U.S. LNG, 101 terawatt-hours of it. The European Commission has been wringing its hands over the Mercosur deal, delaying it, weakening itself, as the reports say. Europe has been paralyzed by its own process. The U.S. pressure, this transactional approach, forces necessary action.
Forces necessary action. You're describing a protection racket. The U.S. is using that energy dominance, that 96% figure you cited, as a bludgeon. It's ironic you mentioned the Mercosur delays because Europe actually built the tool for this exact scenario. It's called the anti-coercion instrument, or the trade bazooka. Europe built that tool specifically to fight economic bullying from China. And now, they're terrified they might have to use it against Washington. They're creating a situation where allies are afraid of each other.
Fear can be a clarifying agent. Sometimes a partnership needs a shock to realize where the actual power lies.
It can also be a corrosive one. Look at the ground level. You can sign a framework at Davos, but you can't mandate popularity. In Denmark, the reaction is visceral. We're seeing a massive surge in apps like Non-USA and Matometer. These are apps designed to help consumers filter out American products from their shopping lists.
I've seen the reports, but
Let me finish, because this is important. The Salling Group, Denmark's largest retailer, is putting black stars on European products to help consumers avoid American goods. This is a grassroots revolt. If the population of your closest ally views you as a bully, you haven't bought security, you've bought resentment. You're losing the hearts and minds of the people who are supposed to be your friends.
I think we need to separate public sentiment, which is fleeting, from strategic necessity, which is permanent. Those boycotts will fade when the economy stabilizes, which this deal ensures. People protest, but they also want cheap energy and stable markets. But I want to pivot to the other half of this equation, which arguably makes the Greenland deal look small by comparison, the Board of Peace.
Ah, yes. This is where the transactional worldview truly goes off the rails. This is the dystopian sequel to the United Nations.
Or where it finally gets honest. Let's be real about the United Nations. It has struggled immensely to handle the crises of the mid-2020s. The Security Council is gridlocked by vetoes. The new Gaza plan needed a mechanism that actually moves money and leaders, not just resolutions. This new body unveiled at Davos already has interest from roughly 30 nations: Hungary, Morocco, Argentina, Israel, Vietnam.
And let's talk about the entry requirements. We're hearing reports that a permanent seat requires a $1 billion fee, a literal buy-in. It's not about diplomatic standing, it's about liquidity.
Which ensures skin in the game. That is the critical difference. We have Vladimir Putin offering $1 billion from frozen Russian assets to buy a seat at the table. Now pause and think about the pragmatism of that. If that money goes toward reconstruction or stabilization, isn't that a net positive? It's money actually going to a cause, rather than sitting in legal limbo while conflicts rage on. It unlocks capital for peace.
It unlocks capital for influence. It turns diplomacy into a country club. If an aggressor can buy rehabilitation using funds that should arguably go to reparations for their victims, we've abandoned the rule of law for the rule of the wallet. It rivals the UN, yes, but it rivals it by excluding the poor. This structure explicitly locks out the global south. It fractures the world into clients and patrons. If you don't have $1 billion, your voice on global peace doesn't matter.
But the current system is failing the global south anyway. The UN isn't preventing wars there. The UN is great at writing reports on why a war happened, but terrible at stopping them. If a board of peace facilitates the flow of capital to rebuild Gaza using frozen assets, and if the Greenland framework secures the minerals needed for the next generation of computing, then these are effective solutions. They're ugly, perhaps, to the purist, but they work.
Effective for whom? For the investors? You mentioned the new Gaza plan. If the reconstruction is dictated by a board of wealthy investors and nations who paid for the privilege, what happens to the self-determination of the people living there? This privatizes global diplomacy. It replaces the messy, imperfect, democratic nature of the UN with a corporate board structure, shareholder value applied to human rights.
Well, maybe a corporate board structure is what we need. Efficiency, clear KPIs, capital allocation. The world is burning while the UN debates the seating arrangements. We need agility.
That is a terrifying thought. You're describing a world where the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. That was the world before 1945. We built institutions specifically to stop that kind of agility. And regarding the Russian assets, think about the precedent. If Putin buys his way back into the international fold for $1 billion, what's the price for the next invasion? Is there a menu? Invasion of a neighbor? $2 billion fine, payable to the board.
That's a slippery slope argument. The reality is that the framework with Rutte suggests that NATO is adapting to this reality. If NATO can evolve to include economic and resource security, like the Greenland deal, it becomes more relevant, not less. It shows the alliance can actually deliver tangible assets.
Or it becomes a tool for American resource acquisition rather than collective defense. The Spanish Foreign Minister, José Manuel Albares, is already calling for a coalition of the willing within the EU to defend itself, implying defense from this kind of coercion. We are seeing the fracturing of the very alliance this deal claims to save. When your friends start building defenses against you, you aren't leading them anymore. You're occupying them.
I view Albares' comments as domestic posturing. The reality is found in the dependencies you mentioned earlier. 96% energy dependence on the U.S. There is no coalition of the willing that can replace 101 terawatt-hours of LNG overnight. Europe has no choice but to align.
And that lack of choice is exactly the problem. It breeds instability. You cannot build a durable order on the basis that your partners have nowhere else to go. Eventually, they will make somewhere else to go. You're incentivizing Europe to decouple from the US just as much as you're trying to decouple from China.
But let's look at the alternative presented in the sources. The U.S. stock market rebounded, and global markets followed. Stability is being priced in. The Board of Peace has interest from 30 nations already. This isn't isolationism, it's a different kind of multilateralism. It's multilateralism with a price tag, sure, but it's one that delivers results. We're seeing a shift to coalitions of the willing who can actually pay the bill.
I come at it from a different way. Results purchased at the expense of legitimacy are temporary. When you have a U.S. president falsely claiming his country gave back a territory to justify taking it again, you're eroding the shared reality that diplomacy relies on. You're eroding trust. And without trust, you don't have a global community, you just have a standoff.
Trust is nice. Rare earth minerals are essential. That seems to be the motto of 2026. If we run out of the minerals needed to run the AI systems that manage our grids, our logistics, and our defense, trust won't keep the lights on.
That's a catchy slogan, but it's a recipe for conflict. If we treat every relationship as a transaction, we lose the capacity for collective sacrifice, and we will need collective sacrifice to deal with climate change, with pandemics, with AI safety. You can't buy your way out of physics. The atmosphere doesn't care about your sovereign base area or your Board of Peace subscription fee.
We're running short on time, so let's move to our closing thoughts. I look at the events of January 22nd, 2026, and I see a necessary pivot. The old institutions, the UN, the traditional trade agreements, they failed to prevent conflict or secure the necessary resources for the AI era. The framework on Greenland and the Board of Peace represent a messy, perhaps abrasive, but ultimately effective new reality. They stabilize the economy by preventing trade wars, and they secure the minerals needed for the next technological epoch. It's a new operating system for a world that has outgrown the old one.
And I look at the same day and see a tragedy. While the markets reacted well to the removal of the immediate tariff threat, the cost was the integrity of the international system. We are moving toward a world where sovereignty is negotiable for the right price, where peace is a subscription service for wealthy nations, and where allies are bullied into handing over chunks of their territory. We are trading the rule of law for the rule of the deal. That might boost the Dow for a day, but it hollows out the foundation of our global stability.
Both of us can agree on one thing. The events of January 22nd, 2026 mark a definitive pivot point. We have moved away from the post-WW2 order towards something entirely different.
Indeed. Whether that something different is sustainable for the planet or just profitable for the powerful is a question the listener will have to decide.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.